Hello and welcome to the unit devoted to Hans Sfard and the cognition in the ICMI Award is Multimedia Online Resources Project, ICMI More. This module number 0 will present some aspects of Hans Sfard's career and background. Hans Sfard received the third ICMI Hans Freudenthal Award in 2007 in recognition of a major cumulative program of research in mathematics education. Anna grew up in post-war communist Poland in a non-observant Jewish family. Her father, Zygmunt Bauman, was university professor, sociologist who with years gained a wide international recognition. Her mother, Janina Lewinson Bauman, from a well-educated family of medical doctors, was a journalist and writer. During World War II, Anna's father, who fled to Russia, joined the Soviet army at the age of 18 and was badly wounded in battles for the liberation of Poland. Her mother spent her young years in the Warsaw ghetto and after the successful escape went with her mother and sister into hiding. Her wartime experiences are commemorated in the book Winter in the Morning she wrote 40 years later. Mathematics was a prominent and highly valued component of Polish intellectual tradition, and this fact had a strong impact on Anna's interest and on her later career choice. Moreover, while high-quality mathematics education was available in many schools in Warsaw, Anna encountered an exceptional opportunity when she joined the high school class taught by Aniela Ehrenfreud, a prominent mathematics educator, author of numerous textbooks and proponent of an innovative teaching method. According to Anna's own account, she might have never turned into mathematics without the love for the subject that Mrs. Ehrenfreud managed to stir in her. At the age of 14, Anna came across an essay by the French mathematician Jacques Hadamard entitled The Psychology of Invention in Mathematical Field. This text, and later also books from Henri Poincaré, initiated a lifelong puzzlement of the mechanism of mathematical thinking. It is then that she started wondering about the fact that, as she later wrote in her book, from a certain point of view, in our lives, mathematical understanding seems to be the all or nothing phenomenon. Either you have it or you don't. And being in any of these two camps appears so natural that you are unable to imagine what it means to be in the other. Even though mathematics was her favorite, she was persuaded by her father to turn to physics. In the autumn of 1967, she started her studies in the physics department at the University of Warsaw. Around that same time, she met her future husband, Leon Sfard, himself a mathematics student who several years later converted to computer sciences. In 1968, a major political crisis changed the life of the Bauman family. In March of that year, the Polish government closed down the production of a classical play by the Polish national poet Adam Mickiewicz. This act of censorship brought a wave of students' protest against restriction of civic liberties and more generally against the Polish communist regime. The authorities responded with a general political purge in the university. Students were arrested and professors dismissed. Leon Sfard was among the former, Anna's father among the latter. In this atmosphere of anti-Semitism instigated by communist officials, Anna's parents decided to immigrate to Israel, and Leon Sfard's family followed within a few months. In Israel, Anna continued her studies in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. After 1 year, she decided to major in mathematics rather than physics. She had the opportunity to be taught by a range of exceptional professors. Among them were such widely renowned mathematicians like Michael Rabin, a famous logician and computer scientist, recipient of the 1976 Turing Prize and a gifted teacher. Joram Lindenstrauss, a functional analyst who received the Israel Prize in 1981 and the Barnard Prize in 1997. Robert Aumann, a game theorist and the 2005 awardee of the Nobel Prize in Economics. and Hillel Freudenthal, a probabilist who gained the Israel Prize in '93 and the Hubble Prize in 2020. In her postgraduate studies, Anna was supervised by Sharon Scheller, one of the leading logicians of her time. Since many mathematicians in the Hebrew University came from Eastern Europe mathematical tradition, Anna felt quite at home in their new environment. She enjoyed the increasingly demanding character of the advanced mathematical topic she was studying. To quote her own words from a short essay entitled "My Route from Mathematics to Mathematical Education," the hope for the sense of deep satisfaction that would come whenever she managed to arrive to an eye-opening insight constituted a powerful motivation to engage in the necessary effort. This period of her life was also a time of reflection on what it meant to learn mathematics. Her own experience in mathematics as mathematics students was to become a source of inspiration for her later work in mathematics education. While getting familiar with a new mathematical object, she also systematically deepened her acquaintance with literature on the philosophy and history of mathematics and science. Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolution and Imre Lakatos' Proof and Refutation, The Logic of Mathematical Discovery would have a critical impact on her future thinking as mathematics education researcher. In 1972, after completing a bachelor degree in mathematics and physics, Anna was admitted in the newly created direct track to the PhD in mathematics. She was the only woman in the program. At the same time, a first son, Michael, was born. A daughter, Amy, arrived 5 years later. Michael is today a prominent Israeli human rights lawyer and activist, whereas Amy is a successful painter. After a few years of successful but stressful effort to coordinate her role as PhD student, mother, and university lecturer in mathematics, Anna began having doubts about her choice of career. She decided she should reconnect with people around her and with her everyday life. Her attention took a definitive turn from mathematics as such to those who learn it when she joined the team of designers working on the new mathematics curriculum for secondary school in Israel. The group was headed by two prominent mathematicians, the games theorist Michael Maschler and the algebraist Shimshon Amistu, with the collaboration of Azrael Levy. Anna's job at the time was to write mathematical analysis textbook for high school and to visit middle schools implementing the new program designed by Michael Maschler. After a few years spent in the mathematics classroom, in which she was observing lessons and discussing them later with teachers, she decided to convert from PhD program in mathematics to research in mathematics education. In 1977, she quickly completed her ongoing investigation in mathematics to a master's thesis in logic, and soon afterwards immersed herself in the doctoral research meant to further her understanding of how people learn mathematics or fail to do so. Two mathematicians served as her doctoral advisors, her previous boss, Michael Maschler, and the logician Menahem Magidor. She completed her studies in 1987 and in 1988 was awarded a doctorate on the teaching and learning of algorithm and recursive function in high school. In her research, Anna Sfard had been influenced by a number of intellectual traditions. According to her own testimony in the introduction of her book, Thinking as Communicating, she has been inspired by Lev Vygotsky and Ludwig Wittgenstein. Another inspiration came from philosophers and linguists who focused on metaphors. Coming from metaphor-rich discourse of a native Polish milieu, Anna was deeply interested in Michael Reedy's seminal 1979 paper, Conduit Metaphor, a case of framed conflict in our language, a bad language. The 1980 book by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson, Metaphor We Live By, inspired by Reedy's paper, shaped Anna's ideas about the role of metaphors in human thinking, even further, as did Lacoste and Johnson's subsequent solo authors' books, Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things, What Categories Reveal About the Mind by Lakoff, and The Body and the Mind, The Bodily Basis of Meaning, Imagination, and Reason by Johnson, published both in 1987. The late 80s and the 90s were a rich critical chapter of Anna's career. The annual conference of the group Psychology and Mathematical Education, PME 11, held in Montreal in July 87, brought a first exposure to the international community of researchers in mathematics education. The event, devoted to Piagetian and New Piagetian constructivism, hosted Hermine Sinclair, Jeremy Kilpatrick, Gérard Vergniaud, and David Wheeler as plenary speakers. This inspiring intellectual encounter will have a considerable impact on Anna's future work, as we'll also have a meeting with two mathematics educators such as Karen Kirian and Paul Cobb, who were to become her colleagues and friends for life. It was also during the Montreal PME that Anna had been introduced to her namesake Anna Szeprinska, through whom she reconnected with Polish mathematics educators like Zbigniew Semantini and Wacek Zawodowski. After completing a PhD, Anna began several international collaborations. In 1989, she was a visiting scholar in Purdue University in the US, working with Ed Dubinsky. In 1990, she stayed at the University of Warwick in the UK, collaborating with David Toll. In 1992, she joined Caroline Kirian at the University of Quebec in Montreal in the comprehensive study called Montreal Algebra Project, devoted to early algebraic thinking. During this period, Anna worked intensively on elaborating the idea of process-object duality of mathematical construct, first introduced in her dissertation. As it turned out, this idea resonated with the thinking of other mathematics educators, and in particular that of Ed Dubinsky and David Toll. With this encouragement, Anna started building theory of mathematical thinking and learning around that claimed that developing mathematical universe involves reification, turning process into object. In her internationally recognized research paper of this period, she illustrated a theoretical construct with evidence coming from empirical studies and from the history of algebra and functions. Among those papers were On the Dual Nature of Mathematical Conception, Reflection on Process and Object as Different Sides of the Same Coin, published in 1991 in Educational Studies in Mathematics, The Gain and Pitfall of Reification, The Case of Algebra, published with Leora Liszewski in 1994, also in Educational Studies in Mathematics. Reification at the Birth of a Metaphor, published in 1994 in For the Learning of Mathematics, and The Development of Algebra, Confronting Historical and Psychological Perspective, published in 1994 in the Journal for Mathematical Behavior. Gradually, Anna Sfard's research developed into a comprehensive program of study, and the theory of learning evolved into one she called cognitive. This non-dualist approach to human development was grounded in the conceptualization of thinking as multimodal, self-communication, of mathematics as a discourse, and of learning mathematics as developing thereof. Reification became a discourse process. The steady refinement and growth of the cognitive framework can be traced through a consecutive publication in the early 2000s. Steering discourse between metaphor and rigor, using focal analysis to investigate the emergence of mathematical objects, published in 2000 in the Journal for Research in Mathematics Education. There is more to discourse that meets the ears, learning from mathematical communications, things that we have not known before, published in 2001 in Educational Studies in Mathematics. Cognition as communication, rethinking learning by talking through multifaceted analysis of students' mathematical interactions, published in 2001 with Caroline Kirian in Mind, Culture and Activity, This last paper applied the cognitive approach to data collected in the Montreal Algebra project. While developing the cognitive approach, Anna also asked questions about the role of theory and about the mutual relations between different theoretical approaches. The study of metaphor was part of the ongoing meta-theoretical effort that was expressed in several papers, the most famous as a telling caveat as its title, on two metaphors for learning and the danger of choosing just one, published in 1998 in Educational Research. Within a few years, Anna disseminated the cognitive paradigm not only through her study and publication, but also those of her PhD students and later of researchers from other parts of the world, covering a wide spectrum of topics at different school levels. Among Anna's PhD students, Irit Lavier conducted a longitudinal project devoted to the early stages in the growth of numerical thinking. Similar work was done for algebraic thinking, as exemplified in Shai Caspi's investigation of the transition from informal to school algebraic discourse. Another topic of study, the role of emotions and identity in mathematical success and failure, was dealt by Enyat Eid Metsuyanim, also Anna's PhD students. Yet another topic undertaken by cognitive researchers has been learning and teaching mathematics in different cultures, especially with Anna Prusak, another of Anna's PhD students, whose work has been published in the 2005 paper, Telling Identities in Search of an Analytic Tool for Investigating Learning as a Culturally Shaped Activity. Yet another project by a current PhD student, Dong Yoon Kim, compared conceptualization of limit and infinity among English-speaking and Korean-speaking learners. Within cognitive framework, all these and many other topics that have been studied so far within different research discourses could now be investigated with the help of a single set of conceptual tools. Anna's 2008 Cambridge University Press book, Thinking as Communicating, Human Development, the Growth of Discourses and Mathematizing, provided an interim summary of cognitive research program, of its theoretical framework and empirical results. Further attempts at synthesizing and integrating came in the form of series of specialists devoted to cognition, such as in 2012 in the International Journal of Educational Research and another in 2016 in Educational Studies and Mathematics. Anna Sfard has been appointed assistant professor in 1995 at the Faculty of Education of the University of Haifa, Israel, where she became professor in 2001. From 2003 to 2007, she also had a chair as the first Lapham Phillips Fitzgerald Professor at the Division of Science and Mathematics Education in the Michigan State University in the US, where she had a close professional contact with John Ferrini Mundi and Nathalie Sinclair. In 2007, she was appointed to chair in mathematics education at the Institute of Education in the University of London in the UK, where she and Candia Morgan worked together on combining cognition with systemic functional linguistics, SFL, and applying it to the study of evolution of mathematical curriculum in England over the time. For 6 years, Anna was splitting her time between the University of Haifa and these other two universities. Since 2017, she also holds a professional position in the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences. She was invited in many countries, including South Africa, California, Australia, Denmark, Colombia, France, Brazil, Sweden, Chile, Italy, and Germany. Over the years, Anna gave plenary addresses at major conferences in mathematics education, such as PME, PMENA, ICMI, MERGA, etc. She also served as a member of many scientific committees, editorial boards, PhD committees, etc. on several continents. Currently, she's finishing her term as a chair of ICMI Awards committees. In Israel, Anna has been keeping an ongoing professional contact with a number of colleagues, and not just from her own university. Among those are Abraham Akavi, Ruama Heaven, and Rina Erkovitz from the Weizmann Institute, Baruch Schwartz from the Hebrew University, and Tommy Dreyfus from Tel Aviv University. The tightest professional contact, though, was with her present and past PhD students, many of whom are now following academic careers in Israel University. Talina Kelly is now the head of the mathematics department in Levitsky College. Einat Eid Mitsuyanin joined the faculty of Technion, known as the Israel MIT in Haifa. And Michael Tabar, who was Anna's postdoctoral student, is now professor at the University of Tel Aviv. All these younger people, as well as quite a number of colleagues intrigued by the cognitive framework, tend to keep together. Several years ago, they created an informal forum of researchers working within the community framework known as the Haifa Discourse Group. This group, which began as a small community of Anna's PhD students, grew with time and is now regularly bringing together scholars at different stages of their academic careers. Anna students from Michigan State University can also be found in other places in the world. In the US, Jill Newton is a professor in Purdue University, and Sasha Wong in Boise State University, and in Korea, Dong Yong Kim. The group organized in February 2019 the first international cognitive workshop in the Faculty of Education in Science and Technology, Technion in Haifa. Its product are about to appear in the special issue of the Journal of Mathematical Behavior, edited by Jason Cooper and Igor Kontorovich. When I asked Anna to name the achievement with which she is particularly satisfied, unsurprisingly, she instantly put forward as her most rewarding effort the ongoing work on cognition as a comprehensive framework for researching, thinking, and learning. On the opposite, when I asked her about things she wanted to achieve but haven't managed to complete, at least yet, she mentioned a project of popularizing her scholarly work. Indeed, she has a strong intention to compile her academic publication into an accessible, comprehensive story, interesting and useful for those for whom her research was meant in the first place, that is, teachers, parents, and all those who are curious to learn more about the inner workings of the human mind and perhaps to confront their own histories as mathematics learners. Her involvement in the ICMI Award project is part of her effort to advance in this latter project. Thank you.